I'm Olivia Carter, 31, and I'd been bleeding Harris Construction Company red since I was old enough to hold a level. For 12 years, I'd worked my way up from carrying tools to project manager to VP of operations. I turned Dad's small residential outfit into a $20 million commercial construction powerhouse. Grace Mitchell, my younger sister, had shown about as much interest in construction as a cat shows in swimming. She'd spent her 20s finding herself through yoga instructor training, artisanal pottery, and whatever other trendy bullshit caught her fancy that month. But something about that text felt wrong. The formal tone, the timing, the fact that Grace's car was already in the parking lot when I'd arrived at 6 a.m., which never happened unless Dad had specifically asked her to be there. My chest tightened like someone was slowly turning a vice. I spent the day trying to focus on the Morrison Medical Center project, our biggest contract to date, but my mind kept drifting to that message. Family meeting, important news. The words circled in my head like vultures. At 5:45 p.m., I walked into our office conference room. Dad sat at the head of the table, looking more serious than I'd seen him since Mom's funeral 3 years ago. Grace was already there, fidgeting with her phone, refusing to meet my eyes. That's when I knew whatever was coming, Grace already knew about it. "Sit down, Olivia," Dad said, his voice carrying that careful tone he used when delivering bad news to clients about cost overruns. I sat, waited, felt my heart hammering against my ribs. "I've been thinking about retirement," he began. "About succession planning. About what's best for the company's future. Here it comes," I thought, finally. After 12 years of proving myself, of bringing in the contracts that kept us afloat, of building relationships with general contractors who trusted Harris Construction because they trusted me. After a lot of consideration, Dad continued, "I've decided to transfer full ownership of Harris Construction to Grace." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Grace, who couldn't tell a Phillips head from a flathead screwdriver, who'd never spent a day on a job site, who'd never read a contract or negotiated with a supplier or dealt with the nightmare of coordinating trades on a tight deadline. Grace was getting the company I'd built. "I know this might come as a surprise," Dad continued, as if he'd just announced the weather instead of destroying my entire future. "But Grace has expressed real interest in taking on leadership. She's got fresh ideas about modernizing our approach." "Fresh ideas, right? What about me?" The words came out strangled. "You'll stay on, of course, help train Grace, show her the ropes. Your experience will be invaluable as she learns the business." Train Grace, show her the ropes, like I was some middle manager instead of the person who'd brought in 80% of our revenue for the past 5 years. Grace finally looked at me, her expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "I've been studying the industry," she said weakly, "taking online courses. I think I can bring a more collaborative, wellness-focused approach to construction management." Wellness-focused construction management. Jesus Christ. "This isn't personal, Olivia," Dad added, like that would somehow make it better. "It's about legacy, about keeping the Harris name on the company. Grace is getting married to Daniel next year. She'll continue the family line." And there it was, the real reason. I was 31, single, focused on my career instead of popping out babies. In Dad's traditional mind, that made me a dead end. Grace, engaged to Daniel Brooks from the prominent Brooks family, was the future. Never mind that I'd sacrificed relationships, weekends, holidays, everything to build this company into something worth having. Never mind that I knew every supplier, every contractor, every building inspector in the city. Never mind that Samuel Wright, our biggest client, specifically requested me for all his projects. None of that mattered because I didn't have a ring on my finger and a man to carry on the precious Harris name. "I need some air," I managed to say, standing up so fast my chair nearly fell over. I walked out of that conference room, out of the building, and sat in my truck for 20 minutes, shaking with rage and hurt and disbelief. 12 years, 12 fucking years of my life, and for what? To train my little sister to run the company I'd built while she figured out how to make construction sites more collaborative? Not happening. I drove home, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for celebrating my promotion to president, a promotion that would never come now, and started planning my exit. By midnight, I'd made my decision. Grace could have Harris Construction, but she could figure out how to run it without me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, methodically going through every file, every contact, every piece of institutional knowledge I'd built over 12 years. The Whitman Hospital project, my relationship with their facilities director, the Morrison Medical Center expansion, a $4.2 million contract I'd personally pitched and won. The Sterling office complex that was supposed to break ground next month, another contract tied directly to my reputation in the market. By dawn, I understood exactly how fucked Grace and Dad were going to be without me. I arrived at the office at 6 a.m. like always, but instead of reviewing project schedules, I started documenting everything. Every client relationship, every vendor contact. Every process I developed to keep projects on time and under budget. Not to help Grace learn, to take it all with me. Marcus Kane, our site supervisor and my closest ally at the company, knocked on my office door at 7:30. "Heard about last night," he said, closing the door behind him. "This is bullshit, Olivia, complete bullshit." "Yeah, well, family business, family decisions." "You're not seriously going to stick around and train her, are you?" I looked up from my computer. What do you think? Marcus grinned. I think Grace Mitchell is about to learn what happens when you bite off more than you can chew. Speaking of which, I said carefully, you might want to start updating your resume. I have a feeling things are about to get interesting around here. He nodded, already on it. Half the crew is talking about jumping ship. Nobody wants to work for someone who doesn't know the difference between a joist and a girder. Over the next week, I put my plan into motion. First, I quietly reached out to our key clients, not to badmouth the company, I wasn't that petty, but to transition relationships, making sure they had my personal cell phone. Letting them know I was exploring new opportunities and would keep them updated. The responses were telling. Samuel Wright, owner of Wright Development and our biggest client, was blunt. If you leave Harris Construction, I'm following you. Your family's company was fine, but I work with you because you get shit done. Without you, they're just another contractor. Patricia Coleman from the Hospital Authority was more diplomatic but equally clear. We've been very pleased with your management of our projects, Olivia. Please keep us informed of any changes in your situation. Even Thomas Reed from the City Planning Office, a guy who usually played everything by the book, pulled me aside after a permit meeting. Whatever you're planning next, I hope you'll consider working with us again. You're one of the few contractors who actually delivers what you promise. Second, I started reaching out to competitors, casual conversations, coffee meetings, exploring the market discussions that gradually became more serious. Meridian Construction offered me a project management role with a 40% salary increase. Davidson and Associates wanted to create a VP position specifically for me. Even Apex Construction, the biggest firm in the state, reached out about expanding their commercial division under my leadership. But the most interesting conversation was with Alina Torres, who ran a boutique construction management firm specializing in medical facilities. She'd been trying to break into the commercial market for years. I've been watching your work on the hospital projects, she told me over lunch. Your approach to coordinating medical construction is exactly what this market needs. Have you ever considered partnership? Partnership? The word hit me like lightning. What kind of partnership? I asked. You bring your expertise and client relationships. I bring 15 years of specialized experience and existing infrastructure. We could dominate the medical construction market within 2 years. The idea was intriguing. More than intriguing, while I was building my escape plan, Grace was busy making a complete mess of things at Harris Construction. Her first executive decision was to implement mindful communication protocols for job sites, actual signs posted around construction sites reminding workers to communicate with intention and respect. The guys thought it was a joke at first. When they realized she was serious, the eye rolling started. Her second brilliant idea was restructuring our project management system to be more collaborative and inclusive. Instead of clear chains of command, she wanted circular leadership where everyone had input on decisions. Marcus called me laughing after Grace's first all-hands meeting. She asked the electricians what they thought about the plumbing layout, asked the plumbers for input on the electrical specs. It was like watching someone try to conduct an orchestra without knowing how to read music. But the real disaster came when Grace decided to handle the Morrison Medical Center client meeting herself. Morrison Medical was our crown jewel, a $4.2 million expansion project I'd been developing for 8 months. The client had specifically requested me for the quarterly review meeting, but Grace insisted on representing the company as the new owner. I wasn't invited to the meeting. Grace said she needed to establish her authority with major clients. Marcus texted me during the meeting, this is a shit show. Grace just suggested using sustainable bamboo flooring in the surgical suites. Bamboo flooring in surgical suites, where sterility and seamless surfaces are literally life and death requirements. Dr. Sarah Chen, Morrison's chief administrator, called me directly that afternoon. Olivia, I need to understand what's happening with Harris Construction. The meeting today was concerning. Grace seemed unfamiliar with our project requirements and made several suggestions that would violate medical facility standards. I chose my words carefully. The company is going through a leadership transition. Grace is taking on more responsibility as she learns the business. I see, Dr. Chen said, in the tone medical professionals use when they're trying not to show alarm. And what's your role going forward? I'm currently evaluating my options. I hope those options include continuing our relationship in some capacity. We've built trust with you specifically, not just with Harris Construction. That evening, Dad called. We need to talk, he said, sounding tired. There have been some complications. What kind of complications? Grace is having trouble with the Morrison account. Dr. Chen called asking specifically for you, and Samuel Wright wants to schedule a meeting about the Sterling project, but he insisted you be there. I almost smiled. Grace is learning, these things take time. Maybe you could work more closely with her on the major clients just until she gets her footing. I thought the whole point was for Grace to establish her authority. Dad was quiet for a moment. We may have underestimated the learning curve. Dad, I've got 12 years of relationships and experience in this industry. You can't just transfer that to someone overnight because she took an online course. I know, but she's committed to making this work. She's putting in long hours, studying everything. Studying isn't the same as understanding, and understanding isn't the same as having the respect of clients who have worked with me for years. Another pause. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe this transition needs to be reconsidered. But even as I said it, I knew Dad wouldn't budge. He'd committed to Grace, and admitting mistake would mean admitting he'd chosen sentiment over business sense. Just help her out with Morrison, okay, as a favor to me? I agreed, but only because I wanted to watch Grace crash and burn in real time. The Morrison meeting the following week was exactly the disaster I'd expected. Grace had prepared a presentation about revolutionizing medical facility construction through holistic design principles. She talked about energy flows and collaborative spaces and creating healing environments. Dr. Chen listened politely for about 10 minutes before cutting her off. Grace, our primary concerns are infection control, equipment accessibility, and regulatory compliance. We need surgical suites that meet strict medical standards, not spaces for meditation. Grace looked flustered. But wellness-focused design can improve patient outcomes. Do you have data supporting that claim for surgical environments specifically? Grace didn't. Of course she didn't. I sat quietly in the corner watching Grace flounder until Dr. Chen directly addressed me. Olivia, can you walk us through the technical specifications for the renovation? For the next hour, I handled every question, explained every detail, demonstrated complete command of the project requirements. Grace sat there looking increasingly irrelevant. After the meeting, Dr. Chen pulled me aside. I need to be direct. If Grace is taking over this project, we have serious concerns about continuity and expertise. Morrison Medical requires a level of technical knowledge and experience that, well, that you possess and she clearly doesn't. I understand your concerns. Is there any scenario where you'd continue managing our account independently? I pretended to consider it. That would depend on the circumstances. What circumstances? I looked her straight in the eye. I'm exploring options for starting my own construction management firm. If that happens, I'd be very interested in continuing our relationship. Dr. Chen nodded immediately. Keep me informed, we'd follow you. By the time I left that meeting, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Grace could have Harris Construction, but Harris Construction without me wasn't worth having. 2 weeks later, everything fell apart in spectacular fashion. It started with the Sterling office complex. Samuel Wright had scheduled a project kickoff meeting, expecting to review final plans before breaking ground. Grace insisted on leading the meeting despite my warnings that Samuel was notorious for his attention to detail and low tolerance for bullshit. I wasn't invited to this meeting either. Grace wanted to establish her credibility with our biggest client. The meeting lasted exactly 23 minutes. Marcus, who was supposed to be the site supervisor, called me afterward. Olivia, it was a fucking disaster. Grace showed up with mood boards, actual mood boards for a commercial office building. Please tell me you're joking. I wish I was. She talked about bringing joy to the workplace and creating spaces for authentic connection. Samuel looked like he was going to have a stroke. Samuel Wright didn't tolerate incompetence. He'd built a real estate empire by demanding excellence and firing anyone who wasted his time. Grace had just wasted 23 minutes of his time with mood boards and wellness buzzwords. My phone rang an hour later, Samuel's name on the screen. Olivia, we need to talk. I figured you might call. What the hell happened in that meeting? I asked for a construction timeline and got a lecture about work-life balance. I sighed. Grace is still learning the business. Learning? Jesus Christ, I've got deadlines to meet, tenants moving in, money on the line. I can't have someone learning on a $3.6 million project. I understand your concerns. Here's what I want to know. Are you still with Harris Construction or not? The moment of truth. Honestly, I'm exploring other options. Good, because I'm pulling the Sterling project, effective immediately. If you start your own company, call me. If you don't, I'll find someone else who knows what they're doing. He hung up. $3.6 million gone just like that. My phone started ringing immediately, Dad calling in a panic. Olivia, Samuel just called. He's canceling the Sterling project. He said Grace was completely unprepared. What happened? Grace happened. I warned you she wasn't ready for major clients. Can you call him? Smooth things over, explain that there was a miscommunication. There wasn't a miscommunication, Dad. Grace genuinely doesn't understand what we do, and Samuel Wright doesn't give second chances. Dad was quiet for a long moment. What do? There's no we anymore. You made that clear when you handed the company to Grace. Olivia, please, the company needs you. Grace needs you, just until she gets up to speed. How long is that going to take? 6 months? A year? How many clients are we going to lose while Grace gets up to speed? She's trying her best. Her best isn't good enough, and frankly, it's not my problem anymore. I hung up. Within 24 hours, the situation got worse. Dr. Chen from Morrison Medical called Grace directly, requesting an immediate meeting to clarify project management responsibilities. The meeting lasted 15 minutes. Dr. Chen asked pointed questions about infection control protocols, equipment specifications, and regulatory compliance requirements. Grace couldn't answer any of them. Morrison Medical pulled their contract that afternoon, $4.2 million gone, 2 major clients representing over 70% of our annual revenue lost in 2 days. The office was in full panic mode. Marcus called me with updates throughout the day. Three guys from the crew just walked off the job, he reported. They're scared about layoffs. Grace called an emergency meeting and started crying when someone asked about job security. She cried in a meeting, full breakdown, talking about how hard she's trying and how nobody appreciates her vision. It was painful to watch. By evening, my phone was buzzing constantly. Text messages from Dad, voicemails from Grace, even a call from Grace's fiancé Daniel asking if I could help the family through this difficult time. I ignored them all. Instead, I called Alina Tours. Alina, it's Olivia Carter. Are you still interested in discussing that partnership? Absolutely. What's your timeline? How fast can we move? With your client relationships and my infrastructure. We could be operational within 2 weeks. Let's do it. I spent the weekend drafting partnership agreements, business plans, and client transition strategies. By Monday morning, I was ready to burn Harris Construction to the ground, but I wanted to give Grace one last chance to fail spectacularly first. I called Dad and agreed to meet with him and Grace, one final meeting to discuss the situation. We met at the office Tuesday evening. Grace looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dad looked older than I'd ever seen him. Thank you for coming, Dad began. We need to figure out how to move forward. The way forward is simple, I said. You admit this experiment failed and restructure the company properly. Grace bristled. I've been running this company for 3 weeks. You can't expect instant perfection. I expect basic competency. You lost our two biggest clients in 2 days because you don't understand what we do. I'm learning. Samuel Wright doesn't care that you're learning. Morrison Medical doesn't care that you're learning. They care about results. Dad tried to mediate. Maybe we can create a co-leadership structure, you and Grace working together. No, I stood up. I'm done. I'm starting my own company. Alina Tours and I are launching Carter Tours Construction Management. We specialize in medical and commercial facilities. Grace went pale. You can't do that. You can't just steal our clients. I'm not stealing anything. Clients choose who they want to work with, and they've chosen to work with me. This is family betrayal, Grace said, her voice rising. You're destroying Dad's legacy out of spite. I'm protecting relationships I spent 12 years building. Dad destroyed his own legacy when he handed the company to someone who wasn't qualified to run it. Dad looked defeated. What about the Harris name? What about keeping the company in the family? The Harris name doesn't mean anything if the company fails, and Grace isn't capable of keeping it from failing. I walked toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, Grace, I hope you figure it out, but you're going to figure it out without me. I left Harris Construction that night and never looked back. Carter Tours Construction Management opened 6 weeks later in a sleek office downtown. Alina had been right about our combined potential. Within a month, we had 3 major contracts and a pipeline of prospects. Samuel Wright was our first client, signing a $5.2 million deal for a mixed-use development. Morrison Medical brought us their expansion project plus 2 additional facilities they'd been planning. Even the city came to us with a proposal for renovating the municipal building. You know what the difference is? Alina asked during our first quarterly review. We're not selling construction services, we're selling expertise, reliability, trust. She was right. Our clients weren't just buying project management, they were buying peace of mind. They knew we'd deliver on time, on budget, and up to spec. That reputation was worth more than any family name. Harris Construction, meanwhile, was hemorrhaging money and clients. I heard the updates through Marcus, who joined our team as operations manager. Grace had tried to pivot the company toward residential renovation, thinking it would be simpler than commercial work. She was wrong. Residential clients were even less tolerant of delays and cost overruns. Within 4 months, Harris Construction had laid off half their crew. Within 6 months, they'd lost their office lease and moved operations to Dad's garage. By the 8-month mark, Grace was working alone, taking on small bathroom remodels and kitchen updates. She's actually not terrible at the residential stuff, Marcus reported. Turns out her wellness focus works better for homeowners than it did for hospitals, but the company's basically a one-person handyman service now. Dad called me exactly 9 months after I'd left. Olivia, his voice sounded hollow, I think I owe you an apology. You think I made a mistake, a big one? I let tradition and sentiment override business sense. Grace has worked hard, but she wasn't ready for the responsibility I gave her. I waited for him to continue. The company's failing. Grace is doing her best with small residential jobs, but we've lost everything we spent 30 years building. The commercial relationships, the reputation, the team, it's all gone. I'm sorry to hear that, Dad. Are you sorry? I considered the question honestly. I'm sorry you're hurting. I'm sorry Grace is struggling, but I'm not sorry I left. Fair enough, he paused. I've been watching your new company. Carter Tours is doing exactly what Harris Construction used to do, but better. You're working with all our old clients. Our old clients chose to work with me. I didn't steal them. I know, that's what makes this so hard. They followed you because you earned their trust, something I should have recognized years ago. Another pause. I'm proud of you, Olivia. I should have said that more when you were here. You built something remarkable, and now you're building something even better. It was the closest thing to a real apology I'd ever gotten from him. What's going to happen to Harris Construction? I asked. Grace wants to keep it going as a residential renovation business. She's actually found her niche there, but the commercial construction company I built, that's over. After we hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the city skyline. So many of those buildings had Harris Construction signs during my tenure, now they'd have Carter Tours signs. The Harris name was disappearing from commercial construction. But the work, the relationships, the expertise, the reputation lived on under a different name, my name. 6 months later, Grace called me. We hadn't spoken since that final meeting at the office. Olivia, it's Grace. Do you have a minute? Her voice was different, calmer, less defensive. Sure, what's up? I wanted to apologize for everything, for how I handled the transition, for not listening to you. For thinking I could just step into a role you'd spent 12 years mastering. I was surprised by her directness. Thank you, that means something. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about why Dad chose me over you, and I realized something. He didn't choose me because I was better qualified. He chose me because he thought I needed it more. What do you mean? You were always the capable one, the reliable one. The one who got things done. Dad figured you'd be fine no matter what happened, but me, I was drifting, trying different things, never really committing to anything. She sighed. He thought giving me the company would solve my problems, but he didn't consider that it would create bigger problems for everyone else. Grace, let me finish. I know now that I wasn't ready. Maybe I could have been eventually with proper training and time. But throwing me into the deep end didn't help anyone. How are you doing now with the residential work? Actually, I love it. Working with homeowners, helping them create spaces they love. It uses my strengths instead of forcing me into areas where I'm weak. I should have started there instead of trying to run the whole company. We talked for another 20 minutes. About family, about business, about the different paths we'd taken. It was the first real conversation we'd had in years. I have one question, Grace said before we hung up. Are you happy with your new company? I looked around my office, thought about our growing client list, our excellent reputation, the team we'd built. Yeah, I am. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm getting credit for what I actually contribute. Good, you deserve that. A year later, Carter Tours Construction Management was featured on the cover of Commercial Construction magazine as one of the region's fastest growing firms. The article highlighted our innovative approach to medical facility construction and our track record of on-budget project delivery. Alina and I were photographed standing in front of the Morrison Medical Center expansion, the project Grace had lost, which we'd completed ahead of schedule and under budget. Any regrets about leaving the family business? The interviewer had asked. I'd thought about it carefully before answering. The hardest part wasn't leaving the company, it was accepting that my family's perception of my value didn't match my actual value. Once I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who'd already decided I wasn't worth much, I was free to build something that reflected what I was actually capable of. The interviewer published that quote as a pull-out box in the article. 2 days after the magazine hit newsstands, Dad called again. Read the article, he said. You look happy? I am happy. I keep that magazine on my coffee table, show it to everyone who visits. That's my daughter, I tell them. She built that company from scratch. I smiled. Thanks, Dad. I know it's too late to change what happened, but I want you to know I finally understand what I lost when I chose Grace over you. It wasn't just your skills or your experience, it was your respect. He was right. I'd lost respect for him the moment he'd handed my life's work to someone who hadn't earned it. Getting that respect back would take time if it happened at all, but at least now he understood what he'd done. The company you built, Carter Tours, that's what Harris Construction should have been, he continued. You took everything good about what we had and made it better. I took what I'd learned and applied it without the complications of family politics, I corrected. Sometimes that's what it takes. As I hung up, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. The hurt had faded. The resentment was gone. I'd gotten something better than an apology or acknowledgement. I'd got proof that I'd been right about my value, proof that I'd been capable of more than they'd recognized, proof that walking away had been the best decision I'd ever made. Carter Tours Construction Management wasn't just my company, it was my vindication. Every successful project, every satisfied client, every industry award we won was evidence that Grace couldn't have done what I did, that Dad had been wrong to choose sentiment over competence. But more than vindication, the company was my freedom, freedom from family expectations, freedom from having to prove myself to people who'd already decided I wasn't enough, freedom to be exactly as successful as I was capable of being. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting back at the people who wronged you. Sometimes it's building something so much better than what they took from you that everyone can see what they actually lost. That's what Carter Tours represents. Not just a construction company, but proof that knowing your own worth is the first step to making sure everyone else knows it too. And if they don't, well, that's their loss, not yours. Thanks for sticking around to the end. If this story hit you in the feels or the spine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more real-life revenge on Revenge Drive.